Hey guys, Brian McCauley here with the Flying for Veterans podcast. We got a really cool episode for you today. We're talking with Captain Dorothy Butala, who is an Army veteran, and she spent some time in Iraq, just south of Baghdad, with a nuclear biological chemical company, also doing some field artillery, and ended up doing real estate as a veteran. So it's a really interesting conversation we had. We got to go fly this past week, and so make sure you check out that video over on our YouTube channel or on our website, flyingforveterans.org. I also wanted to let everybody know that we have merchandise in mugs and t-shirts. Let me see if I can get this in here. As well as hoodies and face masks and all kinds of cool stuff. So if you're interested in picking up any Flying for Veterans merchandise, you can do that at store.flyingforveterans.org. And if you're interested in making a contribution to our mission, you can do that at flyingforveterans.org/support. So without further ado, let's talk with Captain Dorothy Butala.
Yuri Tower, this is the Flying for Veterans podcast, holding short of runway 24, ready for departure. Flying for Veterans podcast, clear for takeoff.
So guys, without further ado, we have Captain Dorothy Butala with us today. How are you doing, Dorothy?
Great. How are you?
I am doing well. We were just talking. It's kind of snowing outside. It's
yeah.
getting to be that time of year in northwestern Pennsylvania. So let's just jump right into things.
Okay.
Why don't we start with your military service? So you, I believe in the plane you talked about, you did 4 years active and 2 in the Guard.
Yes. Yeah. So 4 years, first Cav, and then 2 in the Guard. 1 year in California National Guard, and then 1 in Pennsylvania.
Okay. All right. So what made you want to join the Army?
It's actually a funny story. I didn't really consider joining the Army. And then when I was in college, I was taking a 2-hour bus ride to and from the campus that I was near, Penn State in Philadelphia. And a guy that I knew from high school was in ROTC. And he's like, oh, you should join ROTC. And I was like, eh. And he's like, well, I'll give you a ride to and from school every day. And a ride from a car is 20 minutes rather than a
Instead of a
2-hour bus
2-hour
ride. And
bus
I'm
ride.
like, okay. So I was like, all right, I'll try this. And then I wound up loving it, and I wound up commissioning and he didn't. So it's kind of funny.
So you joined the Army out of convenience in transportation. Is that fair to say?
That I would say that was like a catalyst for it. But I think it was more of maybe fate saying,
Sure.
hey, I'm going to give you this little nudge.
Right.
And it put me somewhere that I wound up loving what I was doing. And I got a scholarship for college. So it all really worked out. So I was glad that, my friend asked me.
Yeah. So well, the story is not similar at all, but it has to do with college. I joined to pay for college. My
Okay.
family was firmly very middle class, made too much money to qualify for financial aid, but
Mhm.
not enough to actually, shell out the money to pay for a college education.
Yeah.
So the Army it was. That's
Yeah.
kind of how I got into it. But you're right. Once
Okay.
you're there and in it, you either love it or hate it. And I'm the same way. I loved it. So it was a really cool thing. So you mentioned ROTC. That was going to be another question of mine. So obviously you commissioned, and I was going to ask which route you took, whether it was ROTC or OCS. So I don't think I've ever met anybody who's gone through ROTC. So what was that like?
It was interesting. I had a unique experience because I was at a satellite campus for Penn State, and they had brought in a new instructor, and the satellite campus at Penn State was really failing. And the year that I joined, this new instructor came in, and there was 7 or 8 of us. And what he actually did is each year in ROTC, you have, outlined training, MS1, MS2, it's military science 1, 2, 3, and 4 that correlate with what year you're in.
Like a
And what he
curriculum
did,
syllabus type deal.
yeah. So what he did, and it's known in ROTC, back then, I don't know now, that your MS3 year is the hardest. Well, I joined in my MS2. Well, what the instructor did is he didn't just teach us the MS1 stuff or MS2 stuff. He taught us the MS3 because Penn State main campus, their cadets are known for being very high speed. And he knew that the program at Abington was failing. So because they weren't getting anybody commissioning from that satellite campus. And we wound up just kicking ass, and a bunch of us wound up commissioning. And I think it was because, instead of him, treating us with like gloved hands and very, lightly and like, oh, we might scare them away, he really, really challenged us. And it just, kind of fed, that fire that we had to, want to be challenged. I think that's what, people want. And
Right.
so it worked out.
Sort of made it as realistic as it could be in, on a college campus type thing.
Yeah, what you can do. So it was really good.
So what was I guess, a day-to-day life in college like being a cadet? Like, you see them on campus wearing their uniforms with their little dots for rank and stuff, which I don't even know what those dots mean. But you see them running around in the morning with the guide on and stuff. So what was that like?
Yeah.
How was it different than I guess a traditional college experience?
I wouldn't say that it was too much different because you took 2 regular classes in civilians a week, and then you had a lab, but lab was when you were in uniform and going out and, doing battle drills or, some type of leadership training. And then the most different thing that I would guess the most difficult thing for college students is getting up at 6 a.m. to go do PT at 6:30.
Sure.
So that would probably be, what was the biggest difference. And it was nice because they gave you a stipend too, because they required you to get up early, do these labs on Thursdays, and then a bunch of the weekends you were gone. So a lot of people didn't hold jobs because now you're holding a regular course, college course curriculum. Now you're adding on getting up, doing PT, doing this lab, and going away on weekends for training. So it could be really taxing. And so they give you a little bit of a stipend, to help with, covering costs that you would otherwise cover if you could have a part-time job.
Right. Okay. So we're through college. You get your commission. Is there anything in ROTC that you have to do after college to get commissioned, or is it you graduate and you're a butter bar lieutenant?
You graduate and you're butter bar. Mm-hmm.
Oh wow. So that's definitely a convenient way to go. So I mean,
Yeah.
I know to become an officer, a degree is required. So they just kind of mesh everything together, huh?
Yeah.
All right.
Tandem.
That's really cool. So what did you get your degree in college?
Speech communication. So I like to talk.
Well,
Basically,
that's good for somebody on a podcast liking to talk.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Basically, it was exercises in critical thinking, writing, and speech development.
Okay.
So.
Okay. So you've graduated college. You're a newly commissioned second lieutenant, and I assume you get sent off to a unit, right?
So actually, I had time before I went to my officer training, before I went to OBC officer basic course. And they were like, well, do you want to do this, advanced camp or basic camp? So in ROTC, say you miss the first 2 years of ROTC and you want to go into your third year, you have to go to basic camp. So it's 4 weeks for cadets, to go through training. And I wound up becoming a lifeguard for the
Oh,
swimming portion of so it really was the best job that I had in the military, like being a lifeguard, because I didn't have to wear a uniform. I was on a lake. I was working with rubber boats, RB-15s and
sure.
Zodiacs, and we were teaching cadets how to capsize them and then recapsize them. And then we did poncho rafts. So we taught the cadets how to build a raft from their rucksacks, their weapons, and their
Right.
ponchos, and how to, do water crossings. And so it was a really cool summer
I think
doing that.
the only thing in the infantry that we learned similar to that was, and I can't even remember which article of clothing it was. It was either your blouse or your pants, but it must have been your pants. You could, how they had the little
Yeah, you blow.
ties
Yeah,
on the
yeah.
ankle.
You
You could,
scoop the wall. Yeah, like you scoop
yep,
the air and it blows them up. Yeah,
yep,
I
and
remember
you
that.
could use them as a flotation device. I think
Yeah.
it's probably the only similar type of training that I had. But that's really interesting.
Yeah.
So when we were up in the air, you I'm probably going to get this wrong, but you said your MOS was 94 kilo,
74 Delta.
74 delta. Where did I get
Yeah.
94 kilo? Anyways, so NBC.
Yes.
What I know what my NBC training was like, but what's it like as having that as an MOS?
So really the training was the biggest part of, as an MOS, once you're out of your training, you're really not doing much of that. But in the training, I mean, you probably went through, and did, went through the house and, did your mop training, test your masks, say your
Sure.
social security number, all that fun stuff.
Getting
Um,
gassed at Benning. Yeah.
yeah. So like we actually went through live nerve agent training. So where you went through CS,
Right. Yeah.
did CS gas, we actually went through nerve agent uh, training.
They exposed you to nerve agents. What was that like?
Yes. Yeah. Um, it was kind of intense, but it was more
I
intense
can
because they were
imagine.
so cautious. And what was funny is, you remember getting your mask fitted, and it fit
Sure.
like relatively snug. Well, when they were putting us through that, they were like pulling this. I mean, people were passing out from like pressure headaches
Wow.
because they were so concerned about the seals breaking. And then that made me kind of nervous because I was like, well, this isn't how we train, for mask fitting,
Right.
like at units. And then when we're going through the schoolhouse, they're like cranking these things down on your face. And yeah, so it was kind of crazy.
So I remember, if I'm being honest, I thought some of the nuclear training that we were taught how to do was a little far-fetched, to say the least. We actually talked about this in the last podcast, so I'd really like your perspective on it. To the best of my recollection, and this was 18 years ago, but if
Same here.
okay, so if there was a nuclear explosion, right? Like you could see the flash, everyone yells flash, flash, flash. And literally, from what I can recall, the training was to lay on the ground and stick the brim of your K-pot into the dirt and I guess just hope you don't die. Like, is that was that your experience? Like there's got to be more to it than that, and maybe they just didn't
um
train us on it. But
yeah, so there's a lot more that goes into it, but for field soldiers, like that's
you're
really all
you're
you can do.
you're
Yeah.
just having a
Like, and
bad day. Sorry, guys.
I mean, I remember them telling us to do the same thing, and then like there was a joke, at the schoolhouse that said like, how do you decon from a nuclear explosion or a nuclear event? When you get up from the ground, you stand up and you do this. That's the only way.
Well,
You're pretty much screwed, is what they're telling
yeah,
you.
if you're lucky enough to stand up. Like, I mean,
Yeah.
granted, nuclear
If you're in the
weapons weren't.
fallout area, that's how you decon. Like, if you're far away enough from the
Just,
blast,
yeah,
that's it.
I'm good. Yeah, it's
I'm
fine.
good.
Yeah, I it just, like I said, granted, there really weren't any threats of nuclear explosions at all. During my time in, or even your time, certainly chemical was more of a threat than anything nuclear, but
Yeah.
it just really demonstrated the Army's thought process on, it's just, you're gonna die. Like, sorry, there's nothing we can do about it. Just lay down on the ground because you're gonna
Yeah,
be there anyways.
because what you don't want is you don't want the initial, because the way the fallout happens, kind of spreads real quick past the ground. So
Right.
what you're doing is getting on the ground, so it kind of goes over you, so you're not just being hit, directly.
But then there's the
But
actual
you're,
blast itself, like
but
that.
the blast itself, you're just,
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
nothing you can do really.
So I also recall on the chemical side, there were 2 injections that, if we suspected we were under a chemical attack, that people would exhibit certain symptoms, and you have to, I think, inject them in the heart with,
Yeah.
I think it was 2-PAM chloride and lorazepam, I think is what they were
I just
called.
remember atropine, the atropine.
2-PAM chloride and atropine. That's what it is.
Yeah.
Yep.
When I remember, I thought it was a stick in the leg. So I'm not.
Maybe I've seen Pulp Fiction one too many times. So that could be true. Yeah, maybe it's in the leg.
Yeah.
Yeah, I always, just because the time, that we served in chemical weapons were certainly
Hmm.
not a huge concern, but they were a concern. They were around and they were being used. It really made you realize the gravity of the situation, carrying those auto injectors around. It was an interesting thought to have to do that to yourself or somebody else.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Definitely.
So, okay. I know you have at least one deployment under your belt. We sort of talked about up in the plains. So, how did that go for you?
It was interesting. So before we were deploying, you were talking about chemical weapons being a thing, during our time. I was actually trained tech escort, which is where you're dealing with um, uh, like industrial chemicals and materials, rather than just weaponized, nerve agent, things like that, where they're actually just weaponizing chemicals that you get in factories and things like that. So they sent 2 platoons to tech escort. It's very hard to get into tech escort. It's a very difficult school to get into. So when they said that they were sending us, we're like, like, this is like the holy grail of schools for chem people to get into.
Right.
And so we're like, yeah, this is awesome. We're gonna do all this high speed stuff. And then we get to, we deploy and we get to Kuwait, and they're like, yeah, you're not going to do that. You're going to do ground patrols like everybody else. And we're like, so while we were training for tech escort, everybody else is getting, all this, mount training, battle drills, like getting all these refreshers. So, there's like 40 of us. They're like, nope, we're switching it over to do this. And then we're like, we didn't even get any training. So so we did a little bit of training in Kuwait. And
where were you at in Kuwait?
Oh God.
You remember? I was only at one camp, and it was Doha. So I always ask people if they were at Doha, just because, maybe
It
we
had
were
to
in
have
the
been
same
Doha.
place.
Wasn't that like the main?
It was the main hub for getting people in and out of Iraq.
Yeah. So that had to have been, where we staged from and left from. Because we actually drove to Iraq from Kuwait.
Yeah. Did they were you in Humvees or in buses with the
Humvees.
blacked out curtains?
Nope.
Oh,
Humvees.
nice.
Yeah, we took all our military equipment, everybody drove everything. So
I remember landing in Kuwait and for the first time, and they put us on these buses
yeah, I
with
remember the buses.
the blackout curtains and
Uh-huh.
the, I guess, I don't even know what they were called, but the Kuwaiti forces, the army, or Kuwaiti army, or whatever it was, like escorting us to our
Hmm.
camp. And I remember thinking, oh man, so this is real now. But then you actually get into Iraq and you're like, oh, Kuwait was a vacation. Like,
Yeah.
they
Yeah.
they certainly take a lot of safety protocols and stuff, but
Mm-mm.
doing it for the first time, it seems a little more I don't know, I guess more of a big deal than it actually is, like getting from the airport to your camp and stuff like that. Like,
Yeah.
Kuwait's relatively safe, but
Yeah.
um
I just think they don't want soldiers running away. So I think it's less about the safety of people coming to get us and more about soldiers like getting separated from the group.
yeah, well, yeah, I hadn't considered that. You might be right. You might
Yeah.
be right.
Well, when we were loading the plane to Iraq, we had a soldier, like we were on the tarmac loading, one of those big commercial 747s that holds however many hundred people. Um, and one of my soldiers turned around and started trying to down the tarmac.
Where are you gonna go in Kuwait? Like, what, you
Nope,
know?
this was in the United States.
Oh,
This was in the States
okay.
as we were loading to try to, go to Kuwait to. It was a whole.
Were they like one of those what do they call them? Conscientious objectors?
No, he actually was there in during the invasion because chemical units. Um, it's funny because people are like, "Oh, you're a chem. What did you do?" But chem units were actually there with the invasion. And
Well, that makes
they
sense.
saw a lot. They saw a lot, and there was constantly, um, sirens going off and whatever. And I think this soldier just had a lot of post-traumatic stress that was unresolved from the first go around. And yeah, he just ran away from the plane. And he wound up coming back. He wound up coming over like 30 days later, after they figured all his stuff out.
Well, they didn't just
But he wasn't
shove him
he
on the plane
wasn't
and tie him down.
no, they did not do that.
I feel like that's
So
what they would have done to us. Be like,
yeah.
sorry, buddy, you're here. Let's
Yeah.
get some extra seatbelts.
But like it gets the MPs involved, because like the
Sure.
MPs are there, so like they have to take him. And everything's on like a very timed, and this happened right at the end. So it wasn't like he tried running away at the beginning, where everybody's still getting on the plane.
Right.
Like this is when the leadership, like all the officers were just getting on because we're the last ones to get on the plane.
Sure.
And he just
Bolts.
and he
Wow.
just pulled it.
So did you guys just let him run? Did anyone try to catch him, or like,
Well,
how did
that's
that
the thing
happen?
is so it's pitch black out at night,
Sure.
there's
Yeah.
only like the lights from whatever, on the tarmac. Um, and they have us all in a line. And, I think there was like two loading areas, for like one
Like walking up the steps.
like two sets of steps. So we're on one set, and soldiers are on this, like depending on where they're putting you on the plane. So, we're just and they're just they're cattle carring you in. They're just
Right. I was just
get
gonna say,
on.
just like getting on those cattle cars. Yeah.
Yeah, and then he just books and runs, and people are kind of like getting on the plane like what's going on, and I'm on the plane already. And then my friend was like, that Sergeant so and so like ran away from the plane. I'm like, what?
Yeah.
And
He
then they
dipped
don't let
out.
you
He's
off.
gone.
Yeah, they don't let you off to go try to,
But yeah.
talk
No.
your soldier
Yeah.
down. And they just do their thing. So
Wow.
what can you do?
Nothing, I guess.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So
Yeah. We had a conscientious objector
okay.
during our train up to go, and like he had just had a baby and just got married and stuff, and just really didn't want to do it, and he ended up not going. I never saw
Oh,
him
wow.
again. um don't know what happened to him. Just kind of disappeared.
That's interesting because the guy that ran away, so he was a squad leader in my platoon. He was about to have a baby, and so I think he came like 30 days later, like, and they put him in battalion staff, but they never changed his rater. So I was his rater still. And they were like, hey, you need to get his NCOER in. And I did exactly, I was like, no, this soldier is a danger. He should not be leading soldiers. And I was actually pulled into the sergeant major's office, and they had this soldier apologize and then asked me to change the OER for him, or the NCOER for him. And I was like, no.
Right.
I'm like, he's a
So
danger to
safety
soldiers. Like,
concern.
I'm
Yeah.
not like, they're like, well, what about his career? I'm like, what about the lives of the soldiers that he may lead? And then I found out that the sergeant major was harassing my platoon sergeant too
To
about it,
change it.
to to change it. And we both had to just stand up to the sergeant major and be like, no, dude, we're not changing this. Well, then a few years after that, after I got out, I got an email. I was still in the National Guard. I remember this. I got an email from that sergeant, and he was calling me every name in the book because I screwed his career, blah, 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 blah. Right. So I'm like, so I responded to him and I said, you're still talking to an officer, because I was still in, and this is being forwarded to your chain of command. And I forwarded the email to
Wow.
the chain of command to be like, what? Yeah, it just, so I'm glad the NCOER worked
Right.
to stop it. But a lot of times, people put that stuff under the rug, and it's just not something I was willing to do.
Yeah, that seems like an accountability thing to me. Obviously, I don't know. To me, when you sign that enlistment contract, like you're basically giving up a lot of freedoms. You lose a lot of autonomy, and you have to be okay with that.
Yeah.
And I don't know. I don't know what was going through his head or anything like that. But I wouldn't be blaming other people. I don't think, like, that was
Yeah.
his own mistake.
Yeah, that it was on him, but I was the one who held him accountable.
Right.
So because I didn't let it slide.
Yeah. Yeah. So what was your day-to-day like in Iraq? Well, first, where
Uh,
were you at?
I was in southern Baghdad,
Yeah.
about 20 minutes south of the airport. So BIOP or Camp Liberty, whatever they call it now.
And what year was this?
This was 04 to 05. So spring
Okay.
of 04 to spring 05.
Okay. All right. And yeah, so what was the day-to-day? What did you guys what was your
So it
mission
depended
once
on
you were
what,
there?
yeah, but depending on what mission you were doing. But like I said before, we were doing ground patrols. So we were in Humvees. So it was all wheeled, mechanized,
Mounted.
mobilized, whatever they call it. And we did a lot of patrolling up and down the main MSRs, the supply routes. So we were
What
on Route Irish, and they had a name for it. It was
we went up
they
and
had some
down.
colloquial
Yeah, we
name
went up
for
and
it.
down MSR Tampa a lot. So I was there 04 to 05 as well. But
Okay.
into crit. And the MSR that we used, I believe they called it MSR1, but it was also called Tampa.
Yeah. See,
I
we
think.
called ours was Irish,
Okay.
and then they had some name for it because of all the IEDs that were on it. It was just a, rough stretch.
Rough stretch of road. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And yeah, so we would either be, on the main supply routes. Sometimes, we would do checkpoints. Sometimes we would do overwatches, on mosques.
Sure.
Been, done where we locked down, a city block and did raids, for whatever intelligence was happening. I also did EOD escort. So if,
Oh.
something was found, we did EOD escort. And
Can
then
I
we
ask you
also did
your EOD escort timeframes? So
uh
we did a lot of patrolling in Secret and the surrounding desert, and found a lot of UXO.
mhm,
And the procedure was call EOD, just sit on it, call EOD, have them come take care of it, and then drive on. Our experience with EOD was that they took quite a while to come
yeah.
out and help. So I was just curious what was there like a sense of exigency when someone found some
Yes.
UXO,
Yeah.
or
So we actually, when you were an EOD escort, you actually stayed in a separate, like little billeting house. I mean, it was the size of a shed. And as soon as a call got out, it was like we pretty much sat there in our gear for 12 hours and we waited for things to happen. So whether it was EOD or QRF,
I was gonna say sort of
for
like a
something else.
QRF type situation?
Yeah. And it was jump as fast as you can. And the EOD uh, personnel, they were the same thing. We were very, situated very close to each other, and we would get out there as fast as you can. But a lot of times, what happens is it would be quiet, and then you get three EOD calls, like all within 15 minutes. So you're like, well, we got to go to, and
Right,
so
that makes sense.
that's what held things up. Sometimes was you would get multiple calls, or something else was going on that they couldn't, get you off the fob or whatever. So,
I
yeah.
hadn't considered that. I do remember waiting for significant periods of time
Hmm.
for EOD to come out and take care of what they were supposed to take care of. Honestly, eventually we just kind of took care of it ourselves, and like didn't even call EOD anymore, just because we had a mission and we couldn't
Yeah.
sit there.
Yeah, it really depends what it was. If it was UXO, if was it, a suspected IED, like UXOs took, I believe, like less time, but if it was a suspected IED, then, they either had to like drive their little robot out, or they
Right.
had to get, fully dressed and, see what was going on. And then a lot of times it was just a paper bag full of rocks. So
A lot of times garbage is mistaken for IDs, for sure. Yeah.
yeah, but like when you have garbage blow up on you, you kind of get a little nervous about garbage.
So did you have multiple deployments, or
Just
um,
one.
just one? I
Just
I
one.
hate saying, I was trying to think of a different way to say that. It's like it sounds diminishing, but just one is enough. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
Like,
just one's enough. Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah. I was like,
yeah.
that's good. Because
Okay.
when I came off of active duty, they were like, well, do you want to go in the guard or do you want to be IRR? And everybody knew that I like the what they call the backdoor draft stop loss
Yeah.
was hitting everybody. And I'm like, well, there's no way in hell I'm going back to Iraq. Like, one and done. I'm done. Um, and so they
So they were
dangled in
pulling from
front
the
of us.
IRR instead of the guard at the time.
So I went into IRR,
Oh,
and I went into the guard. But what they did is, um, if you went into the guard for 2 years, you were um, exempt from deployment during those 2 years, and they
okay.
reduced your IRR by 2 years. So it really meant that you just did 2 years and you were done.
Right. Sort
And
of in a non-deployable
it was
status.
really good because the unit that I went to a field artillery battalion when I was in California, and they wound up coming down on orders, and I helped with them and their deployment, but I didn't go. But it was funny because I kind of felt like I wanted to. So it's like, no, I don't want to go. And then you're in a unit that's going, you're like, all right, I'll go, So
Yeah, that's an interesting feeling. So I was injured when I was at Tikrit, and I was sent back to Walter Reed, and our deployment ended before I was fully healed. And there's a large sense of guilt that you feel like,
mhm.
if you're not there, that's one less person watching someone's back.
Yeah.
Um, that was probably the most difficult part of
Hmm.
you know uh, getting hurt and sent to a hospital. It's not something you consider
Yeah.
beforehand.
You don't think about, like, yeah, I get to go home. No, like you want to be there. I remember being on leave and within 1 week, I was like, I'm ready to go back. Like I did
Yeah,
not want to be home. It was horrible being home. I hated it. And all I wanted to do was go back. Like I actually cried because I just wanted to be with my platoon, and just
yeah,
it,
it's
it
a
was
it's a,
just
a real feeling
it
that
was it was
people
weird.
have. Yeah,
Yeah. Yeah, and you don't think that you're gonna ever feel that way or even consider that as a thing that you might feel, but I definitely 100% felt that way.
yeah, I can definitely relate to that, most most certainly.
Yeah.
So, okay, so you did your 4 years active and two in the guard, and what do you do now? How'd you end up in Erie, Pennsylvania?
So um, after I left California, because I was working for a biopharmaceutical company out there, I came and worked for a financial advisor here in Erie because after I got out of the military, I went to California in San Francisco, and I was just so far away from family. I didn't feel, I felt very disconnected, which is interesting looking back on it. I think it had less to do with San Francisco and more of just coming off the active duty and a deployment and feeling disconnected just in general. I probably would have felt that same way had I been around family too.
Sure. Yeah,
Um,
I've experienced the same
and
as well.
and
It's just not the same. People aren't the same. Situations aren't the same. Circumstances aren't the same.
yeah, and like I just felt like I had a hard time making friends. I didn't feel like I fit in. Like I just felt very, you know, like I am an island kind of
Hmm.
feeling. And so I was like, well, I got to move. I'm going to move back closer to family, and I didn't want to go to Philadelphia because that's where I grew up. And I'm like, well, I always liked Erie when I would visit because I have family who lives here, and I moved here, and and I don't know that I would say it was any better. It was nice having family, because it buffered things or distracted me a little bit more from that feeling of disconnectedness because you already have these connections with these people. um but it took me a long time to make friends. It's not like in the military where you have like you meet a group of people and you're like, all right, these 5 people are going to be my friends for the rest of my, like, I don't know why it happens so quickly in the military and not in the civilian world.
Well, I
Like
think
it's
there's a sense of um, camaraderie. I mean, everybody's going through the same thing. Everybody's
Yeah.
having the same general emotions. Everybody's in the same
Hmm.
situation. I think it's really easy to relate to people.
Yeah. So getting out and trying to make civilian friends was a little weird. you know
Yep.
uh,
I remember one time after I came back, I went to college after um, being in the military, and I was sitting in class, and I always had to sit in the front row because if I didn't, I had a hard time paying attention. I was
mhm.
looking at all the people in the class as opposed to paying attention to the professor. And I remember there were these two. Obviously, I was older as a freshman in college and surrounded by a bunch of 18-year-olds, and
Yeah.
they were complaining about going out the night before and having their liquor be watered down. First of all, I don't know how an 18-year-old knows that their liquor is watered down
Yeah,
unless
right.
they have a lot of experience drinking liquor. But second, it just seemed so stupid to me. Like I just
Mhm.
had such a hard time understanding, after going through some of the things that I went through, how
Mhm.
people could complain honestly about anything. And especially something so stupid. And I definitely had a hard time relating to people, uh, because you just have a completely different worldview, a
Yeah,
different
I mean,
perspective,
yeah,
you know?
if you think about it, the people your age, at the time that you're deployed, they're the ones going out and drinking, and you're trying to make sure, you know,
You and your buddies
people
don't
in your
die
unit,
tomorrow.
aren't
Yeah.
dying. You're handling millions of dollars worth of equipment, and they're, you know, skipping class. Like,
Playing Call of
and
Duty or whatever the video game
I don't want
is.
to diminish what, people are going through, because we all have to go through our phases and stages and learning. Um, but when you're in the military and you're a kid, you're essentially, I mean, wars are run by children, like, or wars are fought by
But
children. I mean,
yeah,
you're basically like the ages of everybody who was in there. I mean, I was a 24-year-old, kid basically,
yeah,
and had a bunch of 18-year-olds and 20-year-olds with a few, older guys thrown in. Like, we're out there doing missions, and no one's trained. No one has any idea what IEDs are. Like, they just started, like,
right. Yeah, that was definitely
and then like
a new
you're
thing.
riding around in Mad Max vehicles, like strapping whatever, welding whatever metal boards,
Putting
sandbags,
sandbags all over the
anything you
floors.
can.
Yeah,
Yeah, anything you can. I mean, I remember when we first started patrolling, we were out in soft skins,
yeah.
like, like
We
just
at least had the um they had like the ballistic uh plates on them, the inch thick ceramic or whatever
yeah. So
on
we started getting those, but like our first couple of patrols were
in the
like, we
soft
just went out in
shells.
soft skins, because the unit before us that we were transitioning with, they were, you know, like, it was just, they were never having any problems. They were like, oh no, this is an easy route, blah blah blah. Soon as that ended, our asses were just handed to us. It
Mm,
was not a matter of if we ever get hit, it was, we're going to go out and something's happening.
right.
And yeah, so it was a bit hairy there for a while.
We could always sort of tell by our op orders whether it was going to be a good day or a bad day, just based
Hmm.
on time frames, because we would go out and patrol and we would do a certain amount of time in different places. But
Hmm.
a lot of our time was spent training the Iraqi National Guard how to do traffic control
Okay.
points and things like that.
Yeah.
um, and generally, if I remember correctly, we didn't want to be in one spot for more than a half hour, 45 minutes, because
Yeah.
then people started to realize you're there and they could send in car bombs and things like that.
Hmm.
And we started to realize, based on time frames in the op orders, whether it was going to be a good day or a bad day.
Yeah, so we had so many patrols going out, because not only was it our company, but there was 3 or 4 batteries going out as well, because I was in a field artillery unit again. Uh, um, love my field artillery brothers and sisters. Um, but so we had, I think that we had 6 patrols out at any one time, 24 hours. It was just a constant, up and
Rotation.
down in your, and that was just our battery, or our battalion, because we had 2 other battalions on our fob as well, and they were doing their patrols too. So it was just swarms of, patrols and all over the place. But we were in a city essentially. I mean, our fob was literally like right across the street, and it's a fully populated area.
Yeah, that's very similar to what ours was like. Being into crit, we Our fob was literally right on the edge of the city, right
Hmm.
up next to the Tigris. We were right there, like
Yeah,
literally right on the other side of the wall was a road and the city. Like it was,
yeah, yeah. Same
yeah,
here. So, um, so yeah, it was interesting.
yeah. So what do you do in Erie now? So you work
uh,
for the financial services
I did work
company.
for in finance, and I did a few jobs. And then I went back to Iraq as a contractor, and I did
Oh,
biometrics on the Syrian border for a year. But now full time, I do real estate redevelopment and investment.
oh, that's cool.
So yeah, and I have my license, my real estate license with Agresti, but I don't do much with that. I mainly have it to be able to have access to all the information,
Hmm.
for my investment side. But yeah, so I work on a lot of residential rentals and renovating them, getting them up to snuff. Um, so.
Oh, that's cool. You had mentioned that when we were flying that you're a business owner, so that's what
Mhm.
you do.
Yeah.
Own rental properties
Hmm.
and rehab them and stuff.
Hmm.
That's cool. What made you decide to get into that? How long have you been doing it for?
So I bought my first property in 2007. But the way that I got into it's so funny. You're gonna laugh at me because you're like, it was a guy that got you into the army, and now it was a guy that got you into rental real estate. But I dated a someone, and they were buying rental property, and he told me, he was like, when you decide to buy something, don't buy a single family home, buy a 4 unit, and you can either live in one unit for free or rent out the fourth unit, make cash flow. And that little seed just stuck with me. So when I got out and I was buying a house, I decided to buy a multifamily. Uh, and so I lived in one and rented out the other two.
Sure.
And, 5 years after that, I was like, I think I'm going to buy another one. And then I went to Iraq as a contractor, saved up a boatload of money, came home, and then I just started kind of
Very
buying and
cool.
buying, and it just kind of fueled my really what it is. The big thing is how lenient real estate is. I don't have to be in a 9 to 5 job. Like I don't. It's not something that I could ever do again in my life. Like it's not something I could ever do. And so it gives me the freedom to, kind of call my own hours
Sure. That's
and,
cool.
do it on my time.
Yeah.
So.
All right. Okay. So, oh, I forgot what I was gonna say. Oh, my neighbor um does something very similar. He buys rental property and then, rents them out. I think he's got maybe like seven now. I don't think he's been
Okay.
doing it as long as you have.
Okay.
Um, but it's always something that's really interested me.
Okay.
I
When we're
I'm
offline, you'll have to tell me his name. I'll see if I know him.
okay. All right. I'm not sure how I could deal with being a landlord. I'd always be worried that people were messing my stuff up. You know what I mean?
You a lot of landlords are accidental landlords. They get inherited, they think they want to buy a rental property, it's going to be easy. Um, so I tell people, I'm like, if you educate yourself and you run it like a business and you take the emotional part out of it, worrying about things like that,
I think I would have a
and put the
hard time with
processes
that.
and procedures into place, it makes it a lot uh yeah, if you run it like a business, it makes it a lot less scary than, getting into it just haphazardly.
Hmm. Yeah. Well, maybe that's something we can discuss because I know my wife is interested in
Okay.
starting to do it, and I don't know. Apparently, my neighbor just finds houses all the time and buys them and does that. So I don't know. Apparently, there's a market for it.
Yes.
Um, I feel like it might be something that would be beneficial to at least learn more about.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah. So, how'd you feel about the plane ride?
I loved it. It's funny, my friends watch the video and they're like, "You just had this huge smile on your face the entire time." But I love experiencing new things, and I love experiencing new things that are, will bring that adrenaline rush. Because I think
Right.
I'm always chasing the adrenaline rushes from Iraq. Because things don't ever really compare to, that
Everything
just
seems a
that
little
intense.
muted, doesn't it?
Yeah. So, so I've done, so getting that little bit of a, that fix
Hmm.
for the adrenaline, it was really awesome.
Yeah, I
The
think.
landing got, I was a little like, oh man, this looks not okay. Okay, we're good.
Yeah, well, so that was the first time I'd flown that plane, and I explained that to you before we took off.
Yeah.
Um, and while it's the same type of plane that I have been flying,
Mhm.
it's just a little bit of a different model, and the seats in it are about 5 inches higher than the
Mhm.
plane that I usually fly. So when you're flying, everything is about a sight picture.
Mhm.
Like that way you don't have to look at all the instruments all the time. You can look out the window and assess how things are going without actually referencing the instruments. And my sight picture looking out of the windows was just a little bit off compared to what I'm used to. And before we went up, I actually took the plane and did a couple go arounds and took off and landed a couple times just so I could be a little more prepared with a better reference to that sight picture. And
Yeah.
I will be honest, the landings that I did without you were fine, just a little bumpy. But uh man, I don't know. Once you get someone in the plane with me, apparently it goes really well, because that was a great landing that we did.
Yeah, it looked like it was going to be a lot worse than it was, and then it just all of a sudden just was like, oh, okay, that wasn't bad at all.
We're on the
It
ground.
looked a
Yeah.
lot worse than it was going to be.
Well, yeah. So the plane is so light and so small that even a small amount of wind really blows it, especially right above
Yeah.
the trees. The wind going above the
Hmm.
trees like that, and so when you are coming in, you kind of get rocked around a little bit, but then
Yeah.
just before you touch down, you get into the ground effect and everything's calm, and that's when you
Hmm.
can, if there's anything that needs to be fixed at the last second, that's when you have time to
Yeah.
fix it. And then we call it greasing it. You just grease it right onto the runway. I would definitely say I greased that one. It was a good one.
Yeah. No, it was a good one.
Yeah.
It was good.
But it was a lot of fun to fly with you. I think sort of an unintended consequence of doing this flying for veterans thing is the conversation, like we had mentioned
Yeah.
in the plane. I just wanted to fly veterans around, but it turns out, at least I am discovering, that when you put a couple of veterans, even if you've never met before, in a tin can, you're going to have some good conversation come out of it. And
Yeah.
after we did the first one, that was sort of the impetus for the podcast. And then I decided, well, maybe I should start recording these flights. Might
Hmm.
be kind of fun. So you were actually the first one um, that I recorded a flight with, and I'm so glad that it worked. I wasn't
Yeah.
I wasn't too sure about the mechanics of it and editing the video and recording the audio and doing it separately and all that stuff, but it turned out pretty well, and people seem to be responding well
Yeah.
to it. So it
Yeah.
was
My friends were watching it and, commenting on it. So yeah.
yeah, it was a lot of fun. And you got to fly a little bit too, so that was
Yeah. Yeah. That was
interesting.
definitely, yeah. The controls are very touchy or
They
very
are.
sensitive. Um, I was like, and it was great because I read the little signs about not doing any acrobatics or anything.
Yeah, yeah.
And I'm like, oh, boo.
Yeah, that plane is not set up for acrobatics. It's
Yeah.
literally just flying.
Yeah.
But
So,
it's a fun little plane to fly. It's certainly not a high performance aircraft or anything like that. You just kind of
oh, but it was still fun. I had a
get up and
blast.
go, and but yeah, it's a lot of fun. And seeing, I think we're really lucky to live where we live and have Presque Isle State Park in the peninsula and
Yeah.
everything. It's really an interesting place to fly around and look at things. I think it would be less interesting for people if we didn't have the lakeshore and the city and the peninsula to fly around.
Yeah. yeah, it gives you like a frame of reference, so you're
Hmm.
like, oh, here's this like point of interest, here's this other one, and you can kind of put it all into perspective, because that's not a perspective that you see all the time from up in the air, unless you're just, coming in for a landing, at the Erie airport. But to be able to be in that small and kind of see that 360, or 180 degrees and look out your window and you're like, oh, there's the marina,
Right.
and you're able to point to your house. It's kind of neat.
Yeah. Yeah. I I'm pretty fortunate. I only live a few minutes away from the airport, so depending on which runway they're using, I fly over my house. Probably 50% of the time when I'm flying in the pattern to come in and land or take off, fly
Yeah.
right over my house, and um, I always send my kids a text or my wife like, "Hey, I'm gonna fly over in a minute. Come out and wave." I get to see them in the backyard from up in the air. It's kind of fun.
Yeah, that's awesome.
Yeah.
I love it.
Yeah, it's pretty cool. So we're hitting up just about an hour here. I do try to
Yep.
keep these to about an hour, but I really wanted to say thank you for coming up and flying with me and agreeing to do the podcast and agreeing to be the guinea pig for filming.
Yeah,
Um,
definitely.
like I said, I wasn't sure if that was going to work out or not, but it seemed to work out well, and I'm gonna try to improve some of the things. It seems like the audio was not stellar, so I have to figure out how to make that maybe a little bit better. But thank you so much. Thank you for your service. I hope you had a great Veterans Day yesterday.
Yeah, no, it
No,
was
that wasn't
everything was
yesterday.
great. 2 days ago.
2 days ago.
What is today?
Yeah,
Yeah, two.
yeah. And thank you so much. And if you ever want to go fly again, it's not a one-time deal. So we'll be happy to take you up again. Maybe, hopefully, in a different plane. I'm looking
Yeah.
into some other options and flight clubs and
Okay.
things like that, where maybe I can
Cool.
get into maybe something with 4 seats, or just a different type of aircraft, or just
Yeah.
something to make it a little more interesting. But
Okay. Yeah, wonderful. I had a great time. I'm really, excited that I saw your post, that this happened, that we met. Because I don't get to meet veterans a lot. And, like you said before, it's meeting other veterans, like it's like you automatically have like a level of a kinship.
sure, yeah, absolutely.
Whereas if I would have met you, just as a civilian, like I'd probably be like, okay.
Yeah, is that gay?
So yeah, so I'm really glad that we got to meet. I love what you want this program to be, being able to fly, families to go see, if they have veterans or soldiers, at a hospital, things like that. I love, what you're looking to do with the program. So,
Well, thank you very much. I appreciate it. I know when I was at Wall Street, I was um, lucky enough to have a family member that lived close by, and once I was able to move around on my own and things, they allowed him to take me out to lunch, a couple of
mhm.
days a week. So I was able to actually get out of the hospital, and um, I think I was pretty fortunate to be in that situation, and I know it really helped me mentally, just so not laying in a bed the whole time.
Yeah,
Um, so if I can, that's definitely something I would like to do, and hopefully be able to provide that same opportunity for other people. So um, yeah, thank you very much. I really,
thank you.
really appreciate you taking the time, and it was a lot of fun flying you.
Yeah, wonderful. I appreciate it too.
All right, well, stay in touch, and we'll talk again soon, I'm sure.
Yeah, wonderful. All right. I'll
Okay.
talk to you soon, Brian.
All right. Bye, Dorothy.
Bye.